Hi. So today I wanted to do something a little different, which is digital painting. I usually prefer traditional, but I thought it would be the perfect medium to try and do some studies because I have been trying to improve my skills when it comes to color, contrast, and building up a scene. And so these are some screenshots I took while watching LOKI, which I wanted to use as reference today. And I hope you have fun watching my process and listening to some of my thoughts maybe. I tried to do a voiceover for the first time, and I'm a bit nervous, but I hope you like it. So about LOKI, I really enjoyed the show. I'm not a huge Marvel fan, but I did really like the character of Loki in all of the movies, and I also think that Tom Hiddleston is a great actor, and I really enjoyed what they did with the show. I think they spoke about some really interesting themes, and just visually it was so interesting, which is also why I chose these screenshots here. There was a lot of really impactful compositions, just like I don't know, the environments, it was all so interesting, and even the CGI didn't look tacky at all. And these three scenes I picked because I really like the color scheme, this like teal and orange, which did appear a lot throughout the movie, and I really like that. It also has those three also have some nice contrasts and different compositions. And so I painted the three paintings more or less separately. I think the first two I did on the same evening, but then the third one some days later. And I even noticed, because I recorded them separately, that with each one they took me less and less time. So the first one I think took me around 55 minutes, I think was the recording time, maybe more like 50. The second was like 40 to 45, and the last one was I think around 35 minutes, not much more than half an hour. And I think you can really tell, or at least I was able to see, that I got more comfortable and confident in the progress. And so I did feel some improvement even just doing these three, which also motivated me to try and do this exercise more often. And as you might already be able to tell, I did struggle quite a bit with the first one, because I think I didn't really know just how much detail I wanted to put in the study, because I did want to focus on color and atmosphere, but it took me some time to figure out how I wanted to do that, and it was not made easier by the fact that the first screen cap was focused more on the faces, so I didn't really know how to deal with that one. But yes, my goal with these three was to try and paint how I would do it if I were to paint traditionally. So I only used one brush, just with a rectangular tip, which I like because you can still see individual brush strokes nicely. Not try to be too perfect, and really try and build up the colors and layers just from the brush strokes. This is actually a part I struggled with a lot. It was the face of the second agent. I guess I would say. Really what I realized doing these little paintings is that I struggle a lot more with seeing colors than I thought I was. I think it's because I don't usually tend to go for these kind of color schemes and have stayed very much in a comfort zone when it comes to painting and choosing colors. And it's fascinating actually, because you really don't realize how much your mind tricks you to think that you know what kind of colors you're seeing, but really it's more that you are kind of expecting to see color where it isn't actually. And I definitely believe in the fact that painting and drawing is much more about learning how to see properly than the actual like motions and techniques of the painting. And yeah, I guess I have learned that I have a lot to improve on that. And I think those kind of studies are great practice. I would recommend everyone to try it as well. It's always hard for me to find good references. I usually use Pinterest, but you don't really get to see these kind of high quality, good and varied scenes. It's much more, well, it's better for portraits and more smaller, fun sketches. But I think it's a great idea to use shows like this. It's too bad that Netflix doesn't allow you to screenshot. But I guess you could just pause the screen and paint while you're watching. Take a few minutes, maybe a little more, to pause and study what you're looking at, and even just be mindful in general. I think a really fun part here was adding the highlights. It really brings a lot of life to the painting, and I love the contrast that it gives. It's also why I think later on I brought back some true black into the scene, because it's very dark, as you can see. It's actually almost hard to make up the details. Then I moved on to the background because I realized it was really too light and almost too gray too, but then I overdid it here. So I played around with that a little. So this is something you'll see me doing a lot. Here I realized that the background was still much too light, and I just went over with a dark brush but lowered the opacity and just went across. And now I think it's much closer to the color I wanted to achieve. And I think that's really great about digital art, that you can do this, and it was helpful to check in with the reference beside at times. this is probably the most fun part. It's adding in the oranges at the end, which there aren't a lot in the scene, so I kind of overly pronounce them a little bit just because I really love that contrast it brings. Yeah, so on to the next painting. Again, I struggled a lot with the color, getting it right at first, played a lot around with this one a lot. I have to say this one is probably my least favorite, although I really like how Mobius, yes, how Mobius came out and the characters in the front. But the background, I don't know what it is. Maybe it is because the colors are, or the differences in hues and value are all very small, and so it was maybe harder for me to figure out where to put the shadows and which colors exactly I want, because you have these very similar hues all over the background, and what your mind does, it is kind of blends it all into one, and it can be hard to differentiate between them after, especially with this kind of color. What you probably don't realize at first is just how green or teal the whole picture actually is. Like even Mobius' hair, for example, it looks gray to us, but if you zoom in, it's actually quite teal colored, and this is something you have to realize. Now here I am just sketching in Mobius. I think it's Mobius. Mobius? I don't know. I watched the whole show, but I still struggle to pronounce, I guess. But yeah, I was really satisfied how it came up, because I really didn't want to overdo any details, but at the same time, because the characters are in the forefront, I wanted to put in just a little bit more detail than in the background. And he worked out really well. But then when we get to Loki, I started overworking the face way too much, and I realized this, but I think it's because it's just that he is so recognizable as a character. I didn't want it to look off, but then I just overworked it. I probably should have just left it like this. It's really not that important, but yeah, you will see I spent a lot of time fixing his face, trying to make it look more like him, but without getting too detailed. Probably should have just left it, to be honest. Now here the background, the little view out of the window, I played around with that a lot as well, because I feel like I didn't quite realize what color was dominant, and I first went with this kind of approach, but then it was too detailed for me, so I went over it with one wash of color, which you'll see later, I didn't record that part. But actually thinking about it, I maybe preferred how it looked before, though it probably took away too much of the attention from the foreground. And then here, before I started the third one, I accidentally, I don't know, I think I filled in that part, and so we have these weird outlines that appeared there. just too bad, but it's fine. But really the third painting I think worked out the most, the way I wanted it to the best, because here I really was much more loose by the time I got there. I was especially satisfied with the pictures and with the figures and how the whole scene, like the mood and tone of the colors, turned out to be quite similar to my reference. Even though you will see I played a lot, I messed with the background a lot, which is to be expected because I almost always just paint or draw faces and people and rarely ever do backgrounds or complicated scenes. But that is exactly why I did these, to get better at that, and I think it really helped, and I'm planning to do more of these kind of exercises in the future, maybe also in traditional, not just digital, and see how that translates into a different medium. I have to say I was pretty satisfied with how the figures in the last one came out, and also just the process. I was able to much quicker and more confidently block in the shapes, which is also why it was the one which took me the least amount of time. But yes, don't really have anything more to say. I'll just leave the rest, and I hope you enjoy the rest of my painting process. So here I'm just fixing the colors a little bit. I realized that the background as well as the characters were a bit too light, and I think they still are, but it's fine. It's not supposed to be perfect copy, and I really enjoyed the process. I think it was a really great learning experience. And yeah, I think at least I could tell that I improved while doing these. I hope you could learn something or get inspiration, or at least you had fun watching. Maybe you'll also watch the show or try something like this as well. But thank you for watching. Leave a like if you liked the video, and I'll show my other social media on screen right now. Bye!